And you can access the translation by pressing the button at the bottom of the screen, the interpretation button, and selecting the language of your choice, either Ukrainian or English. We encourage you not to stay in the general channel because then you will hear both Ukrainian and English, which might not be ideal. So if anyone has problems, please raise your hand and we will try to help you. The other thing I'm going to say right at the beginning is that we're going to have 3 presentations fast, each of them of up to 20 minutes, and I will remind each speaker 2 minutes before the allotted time, that the allotted time is about to finish. And at the end, then we will move to the question and answer session. You can ask your questions either by raising hand and speaking and asking on an open forum, or you can add your question to the chat, which is accessible again through the button at the bottom of the screen. So I think this is all housekeeping, and now let me officially welcome you. My name is Maja Kominko, and I'm pleased to see you all. And pleased to welcome you on behalf of our project, Architectural Heritage Preservation in Times of War, the Ukrainian Model. This project is a cooperation between the Heritage Management Organization, Kharkiv School of Architecture, and Skeiron. It focuses on training the new generation of conservation architects and preparing conservation documentation. In practical terms, what it means is that we support a documentation and conservation course for the 3rd-year students of Kharkiv School of Architecture and training program for teachers from schools of architecture across Ukraine to help them develop conservation courses at their institutions. Importantly, all documentation prepared during the practical part of the training will be usable in future conservations. As a part of this project, we are hosting a series of webinars with leading experts in the field. And today I'm absolutely delighted to introduce 3 wonderful speakers. Professor Marcel Velinga, he will speak first. Professor Velinga is the director of the Endangered Wooden Architecture Programme at Oxford Brookes University. He specializes in the anthropology of architecture, vernacular architecture, rural architecture regeneration, and culture and sustainability. Then we will have a presentation from Doug Evans, who is the chair of ICOMOS UK Wood Forum, and I believe also Canadian Wood Forum of ICOMOS. He is a heritage consultant, trained as an architect with over 40 years of professional experience in the conservation and adaptive reuse of historic buildings. And last but very much not least, Mihailo Zakopets is the director of, the full name is Lviv Museum of Folk Architecture and Rural Life, named after Clementy Szeptycki, but we all know it and love it as Szewczynski Grove or Szewczynski High. Mihailo is trained as a classical musician and cultural manager, and since 2020, he has focused on the leadership in the preservation of wooden architecture and cultural heritage, especially in Ukraine. We are delighted to have you all with us, and I'm going to hand over to Marcel. Thank you so much, Marcel. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Maya. Let me.
I think, Athena, if you could unshare the screen.
Yeah. Okay. I hope this works and you can all see.
Yes. Yes.
Right. You can see the presentation. Okay,
yes.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Maya, for the introduction and of course for the invitation in the first place. Really, it's I'm really happy to be involved in this seminar, and only sorry that it has to be online, but I suppose that's the way these things go nowadays. It's all online. It's so great, really, to see so many people with an interest in wooden architecture, and it's really a privilege to be asked to share share the online podium really with Doug and Michaela, really, such distinguished and knowledgeable scholars really in the world of wooden architecture. So as you already said, I work in the School of Architecture at Oxford Brookes, but I'm an anthropologist by training. I'm not an architect. But throughout my career, I focused on vernacular architecture in particular. And I started off my work in Southeast Asia, Indonesia in particular, where of course there's a very long tradition of beautiful wooden architecture. That was my first area of research. But then when I came to Oxford, it expanded to other forms of vernacular architecture as well. So I wouldn't call myself an expert in wooden architecture per se. I'm more looking at vernacular architecture more generally. So I've got a more general and a more comparative focus. Nonetheless, one of the projects that I lead at the moment is the Endangered Wooden Architecture Programme that Maya already mentioned, and I have to thank Maya for being the instigator really of that program. You approached me rather than I approached you, so that's great. And we were well, it was envisioned, I suppose, before the COVID period, but we started formally in 2021 with support from Arcadia, the charitable fund. So that was fantastic, really, opportunity for us to do some work around wooden architecture, and particularly wooden architecture that is endangered. So the program really focuses on wooden traditions endangered because of neglect, because of environmental change, or as in the case of Ukraine, because of conflict. And sadly, as we know, there's no shortage of such endangered wooden architecture around the world. So today I'll talk very briefly about the program, a little bit about the background, the methods, particularly the methods that have been used by the various projects that we funded. And then also look at the challenges. I think that was one of the things that was of interest to hear us talk about, the challenges of wooden architecture, documentation in the case of the projects that we fund. So formally, the program has three aims. So first of all, it is to award grants for the documentation of endangered wooden architecture to projects from all around the world. Secondly, it is to maintain the data that these various projects generate for the long term within, and this is an important aspect of the program, within an open access digital repository, so all the data will be available, open access to anybody, anywhere in the world. And then thirdly, the program aimed to develop research capacity, foster new collaborations and initiatives, and raise awareness and appreciation of wooden architecture around the world. So far, I think we're about 4 years in now, 4 years in. We've mainly focused on the first two aims of the program, but we're developing ideas and smaller projects around the third one as we speak. So it's a small team that we're working with, 6 of us at the moment, including myself. So it's me as the director of the program, Eileen Orbashli as the deputy director. We have Kelly Reed, who is with us as the program manager and really is the person that runs the program. Then we've got Tiago Queiroz, who is our 3D and digitization manager, if you like. So he has all the knowledge about 3D digitization. We've got Martin Devereux, who is an archivist who helps us with developing and maintaining the digital archive. And then we have Sandra Wilkins, who is a computer programmer, but also acts as the data administrator within the program. So it's a small team, all based at Oxford Brookes, and working hard to kind of make this program a success. So since 2021, we've had 3 grant rounds, and throughout these rounds, we managed to fund 50 projects from around the world, mainly, I should say, in Asia, particularly South Asia and Southeast Asia, but also in Latin America, Brazil, Chile, in Africa. Sorry, it says Asia on the screen, but it should say Africa. We've got some projects in Western Africa, as well as in Kenya, And then we have some projects in Eastern Europe as well. 13 of these projects are large ones, so we've given out £150,000, and a lot chunk of that money goes to the LiDAR scanning equipment. We had 28 smaller projects, which are kind of £25,000 grants, where the digital element is much smaller and it's more traditional ways of documenting. And then we have 9 medium projects as well, which are also digitally focused, many of them, but the equipment used is slightly different. And in fact, we do have 2 projects that we funded in the Ukraine during our last funding round, and I'm just looking up the details. One is called Guardians of the Forest, recording Ukraine's wooden churches by, and apologies if I don't pronounce the names correctly, Mikhailo Kochon at Lviv Polytechnic National University. So that aims to document 20 churches in Transcarpathia. And then we have a second project called Saving Western Ukraine's Wooden Buildings by Serhiy Chipishev. And the host institution is the World Heritage Watch. And that aims to document the number of houses and other building types, a barn, for instance, in Western Ukraine. So, as I said, all these projects will be collecting data using a number of methods. And once all these data have been collected and analyzed and finalized, etc., they will be made available through our data archive at Oxford Brookes. I'm currently using Arches for that, but we're looking to move that to another portal. And also we ask the projects themselves to maintain an archive of all the data that they collect. And crucially, all the information will be available open access using Creative Commons license. So it's a long named one, CC BY NC SA 4.0, which basically means that all the data can be used for research purposes, for teaching purposes, and people can play around with the data if you like, but they cannot use them for commercial purposes. And so these are the types of methods of collection, data collection that the projects are using. Many drawings, architecture drawings, very valuable. We find still sketches, measure drawings, technical drawings, etc. Plans, sections, elevations. Got a lot of teams that use photography, of course, videography as well. Videos to document the building, but also to carry out interviews with builders, with owners, with inhabitants, with other people who are related to the buildings. There's a mapping going on, interviews, or collection of oral histories. And then in particular, I suppose, the thing that a lot of people seem to get really excited about, the photogrammetry as a method to document a lot of these buildings, and LiDAR scanning as well, point cloud scanning, both terrestrial and aerial. And so quite a few of the projects incorporate at least photogrammetry, and the larger projects are able to also include LiDAR scanning. And all of this results in very different types of outputs, obviously, but each with their own kind of advantages in terms of documentation. I do apologize. I got my cat in the room, and he's a bit he's a bit active at the moment and noisy. Okay, so that was the methods and the background to the project in very briefly. What I wanted to talk about now is more the challenges really that we've found that most projects, or a lot of projects, face whilst working on the programs. And roughly speaking, they can be divided into 3 stages. So there's a lot of challenges pre-field work, if you like. So at the start of identifying the project, working out what the scope of it would be, what methods should be used, etc. And then there's the field work period, challenges that emerge whilst people are out in the field trying to collect all the data. And then there's also post-field work challenges. And I think they're just interesting to just quickly run through. They may be particular to our program. I don't know. Some of these things possibly are. But in general, I would have thought a lot of the a lot of projects working in such challenging contexts will have this kind of problems. So the first one we've noticed, and this is particular to our program, but probably very relevant in more general terms as well, is the capacity that is available, both in terms of people and the skills that they have, and also the infrastructure, if you like, the research or the documentation infrastructure that is out there in the world. So as I said already, a lot of our programs, our projects have been funded in South Asia and Southeast Asia, where there's a strong interest in the wooden architectural heritage. Obviously, there's a lot of threats there as well, but there's also the infrastructure in the sense of universities, heritage conservation organizations, NGOs, etc., that work in this field and that are actively trying to document these buildings. And when we turn to other parts of the world, we've noted that interest may be less prevalent, not because people are not necessarily interested in their wooden architecture heritage, but basically because they don't have the infrastructure. There's not the research institutes or the NGOs, etc., available that can host projects such as the ones that we fund. And also, even if the scholars are there and their interests are there, a lot of people focus their attention on other more urgent matters to do with livelihood and conflict, etc., where architecture is not necessarily at the forefront of people's minds. So even though we try to encourage it a lot, and we were hoping for a lot of projects, proposals from Africa in particular, and also Latin America, we simply had a lot of less interest, which is a shame, which means that the kind of project is really geared towards Asia much more than the other parts of the world. Now, of equal interest, but probably less relevant in all contexts, but very important in the context of EWOP, is the kind of regulations and bureaucracy that comes around trying to fund projects all around the world. Maya will probably know a lot more about this than me from experience, but there's issues around contracts, issues around our university checking credibility of institutions in other parts of the world and raising issues around their credibility. Contracts can take a long time to be drawn up and agreed. Transferring money from the UK to other parts of the world can be really, really challenging, as we found. And that's not just to places such as Ukraine, where it was a bit of an issue, but also to other parts of the world, such as India, in fact, where, sometimes you can only transfer funds if they're in the local currency, etc., etc. So all kinds of like basic practical issues that make it difficult for the projects to sometimes start or start on time. Insurance is a big one. Our university obliges us to request people to have liability insurance, professional indemnity insurance, etc. And in many parts of the world, that kind of insurance doesn't exist, or people find it hard to find an insurance company that's willing to fund them. Drones are a disaster, to be quite honest, in terms of the permits that are needed to fly them over certain parts of the world, the permits that are needed to carry them from one part of the world to the other, etc. And a lot of our projects have had problems with that. And then there's the kind of more common issues such as visas as well for researchers, people not necessarily being allowed into countries, etc. So these are all kind of things that are challenging before the work even really starts, but very important ones to address. Then once people actually do get out into the field, all kinds of other challenges often emerge as well. So there's the issue of access to fieldwork sites, particularly, of course, when there's conflict situations such as Ukraine or other countries around the world. Some parts of the world are accessible or not accessible at all, or maybe they were accessible last week, but they are no longer accessible today. And so there's quite a few of our projects in Myanmar, for instance, but also in Ukraine struggle with that issue. There's weather restrictions, climatic restrictions, LiDAR scanners don't work when it's minus 30 degrees, as it is in Mongolia, for instance, or in parts of Kashmir. People have to move their schedules around, cannot work with the scanners, cannot access particular valleys because of snowfall, etc., etc. Visas, again, play a large role. Some people have their visas, but once they're there, other still, visas get challenged and people find it hard to travel around. Transportation might not be available. We had one team that had to use helicopters to fly to the village that they were documenting the buildings, etc., etc. So there's again, practical issues. There's issues around ethics and consent. We're very, very hot on that issue. We're dealing with sometimes the building heritage of very vulnerable communities, for instance, in Africa or parts of Asia, indigenous communities, where it is very easy for a researcher to fly in or walk into the village, scan, take photographs, interview, etc., and leave again, without actually, ethically addressing the issues that the intellectual property right of those buildings rests with those communities, for instance. People may not want to be filmed, people may not want to necessarily be photographed. And so we're very hot on the ethics part of the projects and the consent that is needed. And again, that can be really difficult. It's one thing to go out into America, Canada, or UK and get somebody to sign consent forms. It's quite different to do that in other parts of the world where people may not write or read. Communities may be very hierarchically organized, and some people cannot be spoken to in any case. Large parts of the world, but people still don't really understand what the digital world is about, let alone what open access means, etc. So there's issues there, challenges there. Health and safety is another one related to ethics, but in this case, the health and safety of the communities that people work in, but also the health and safety of the teams themselves. So in many cases, the buildings are documented for a reason. They're endangered, they're structurally unsound, they're sometimes falling to pieces. So it's difficult sometimes to access the sites, to be able to get into the buildings, to get to the second floor levels of the buildings, etc. Scanners might not be able to be moved up there, and there's also issues around the security of the team in some parts, and the security of the equipment that the teams carry with them, where people have to make sure that none of that is stolen, people are not harassed, etc., etc. And one of the sad challenges really that came out of the program, one which I think we didn't really anticipate, is that we have found that once some of the buildings have been documented, community members would say, well, great, you've got photographs of it, you've got a digital version of it, we tear it down. So there's been quite a few examples where buildings were documented and a week later they were literally gone, really, and all that is left is the documentations that the teams have produced. So that is an unwanted kind of consequence of the program, but one that has happened quite a few times, really. So we're trying to think about ways of how can we actually make sure that that does not happen. So those are fieldwork challenges. But then there is also the third stage, if you like, the post-fieldwork part of the process, which is one that is often underestimated by the project team. So people pay a lot of attention to collecting data, but processing data takes a lot of time.
Marcel,
2 minutes?
2 minutes, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Processing data takes a lot of time, especially when we're talking about scanners, right? It can take 5 days for a computer to process, these huge file sizes. We've got problems with transporting the file sizes from one country to the other. There's issues around what file types do we use, which ones can we accept, which ones might still be acceptable in the future, which ones might no longer be that accessible, etc. There's questions around how do we deal with different languages, how do we make sure that the archival system that we have is searchable. It's an English language data archival system, so we've had to build in ways to make sure that buildings can still be documented in their local language, but nonetheless be searchable in English. And then there is, very particular to our program, the issue of long-term sustainability. So how do we maintain these archival systems that have huge amounts of data in them? I mean, we've just received the first large grant data set from India, and we're talking about 22 terabytes of data for one project only. So we've got 50 projects. So we're talking about huge amounts of data that we need to sustain, that we need to make sure remain accessible in the future, and that will not get lost in the digital ether. Okay, so I leave it at that, Maya.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And absolutely perfect timing. We already have questions in the chat, but we will ask at the end. Thank you so very much, Marcel. And we're looking forward to the discussion. And now over to Doug. Doug, if we can invite you to share your PowerPoint. Yes, super. And maybe unmute yourself.
There we go. There we go. Sorry.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And here we go. Okay. Yeah, can everybody see that?
Yes, super.
Okay. Thank you, Maya, for the invitation to speak at your webinar today. Good evening, everyone. I'll have to first apologize. I've just got the tail end of a cough and a tail end of a cold and an annoying cough. So apologies. My name is Doug Evans, and I will be talking today about the ICOMOS International Wood Committee and its principles for the conservation of wooden-built heritage. So, who has heard of ICOMOS? ICOMOS, the International Council on Monuments and Sites, is an advisory body of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee for the implementation of the World Heritage Convention. It is a global, non-governmental organization formed in 1965, and its mission is to promote the conservation, protection, use, and enhancement of monuments, building complexes, and sites. It is a network of experts, professionals, and practitioners that currently brings together over 11,000 members from 132 nations and territories, dedicated to the conservation of the world's cultural heritage. Its members participate in the development of doctrine and the evolution and distribution of ideas. The ICOMOS International Wood Committee was established in 1975, and the need for a set of conservation principles has been a continuous theme in the committee's activities ever since. The first wood principles were adopted by ICOMOS in 1999 and updated and revised in 2017. But before I discuss the principles, I want to say a bit more about ICOMOS and what it does. ICOMOS works for the conservation and protection of cultural heritage places. It is the only global non-governmental organization of its kind, promoting the application of theory, methodology, and scientific techniques to this. Oops, okay. I've got a button here saying start my video. Don't know what that means. Anyways, where was I? Of its kind, promoting the application of theory, methodology, and scientific techniques to the conservation of cultural heritage. Its work is based on the principles in the 1964 Venice Charter, as well as a number of other conservation doctrines. ICOMOS has been actively supporting the Ukrainian cultural heritage community since the start of the war, including assisting UNESCO and mobilizing its committees to provide support. ICOMOS also has a role as one of 3 official advisors to UNESCO on cultural World Heritage sites under the 1972 World Heritage Convention, including reviewing nominations. ICOMOS benefits from the knowledge exchange between its international network of members, including architects, historians, archaeologists, art historians, geographers, anthropologists, engineers, and town planners, to name a few. ICOMOS brings together, develops, and serves its worldwide membership through the work of international scientific committees. Currently, there are 31. Some of these will be of interest and relevance to many of you here today. The committees undertake research, develop conservation theory, guidelines, and charters, foster training for better heritage conservation, promote international exchange of scientific information, and carry out common projects. Membership of ICOMOS is usually attained through national committees. These are usually the only organizations in their respective countries that offer heritage practitioners access to a truly international interdisciplinary network of cultural heritage professionals and practitioners. ICOMOS Ukraine is the national committee for Ukraine and has been a full member of ICOMOS since 1994. So let's move on to wood. The ICOMOS International Wood Committee was established in 1974-5 and is one of the specialized international scientific committees of ICOMOS. Its aim is to promote international cooperation in the field of conservation of wooden-built heritage and to advise on ICOMOS programs in the field. The committee provides an international forum for the interchange of experience, ideas, and knowledge, and aims to coordinate existing studies and promote further studies, extend technical cooperation, and establish links with specialized institutions or industrial organizations in appropriate fields. Some ICOMOS national committees have their own national wood committees. For example, the ICOMOS UK Wood Forum has over 40 members from a wide variety of disciplines. We run a regular online talk series that has a wide international audience, the aim being to spread knowledge and build relationships. So, what are the benefits of having guiding principles for the conservation of wooden-built heritage? Ever since the ICOMOS International Wood Committee was established, a continuous theme in the committee's ongoing debates and activities has been the need to define basic and universally applicable principles and practices for the protection and conservation of wooden-built heritage. The scope of such a project was first discussed during the International Wood Committee meeting in Kathmandu, Nepal in 1992. Draft principles were debated further at meetings and international symposia of the Wood Committee in Japan in 1994, Bulgaria in 96, England in 97, and China in 1998. The final version, Principles for the Preservation of Historic Timber Structures, excuse me, was formally adopted at the 12th ICOMOS General Assembly in Mexico in 1999. The committee believed, as a result of its wide-reaching consultations, that the principles represented the predominant view among the world's experts at the time on the preservation of historic timber structures. Initial proposals to update the original 1999 principles were first put forward at the International Wood Committee Symposium in 2012, and discussions continued at international symposiums in 2013 and 2016. The resulting document, Principles for the Conservation of Wooden-Built Heritage, was adopted in 2017 at the 19th General Assembly of ICOMOS in Delhi. The main reasons that led to the revision of the principles included a desire to better recognize a wider variety of wooden heritage, including its intangible side, to better recognize the diversity of cultural heritage and subsequent diversity of approaches, and therefore to reflect the 1994 NARA document on authenticity, and to update and adapt its content to present-day concerns, knowledge, and processes. For the new version, the introductory preambles were rewritten. The old section on inspection, recording, and documentation was split up into 3 new sections. The old sections on interventions and repair and replacement were combined and rewritten. Various other old sections were rewritten, and a new glossary of terms was added. The preambles in the new 2017 version reflect the broader purpose and scope of the document. Where the original principles referred to preservation of historic timber structures, the new principles were aimed at the protection and conservation of wooden-built heritage, which is defined as all types of wooden buildings and other wooden structures, including the wooden elements of constructions, that have cultural significance or are parts of historic areas, and including temporary, movable, and evolving structures. The new sections on inspections, survey and research, analysis and evolution, and recording and documentation were added to reflect the primary aim of conservation to maintain the authenticity of the heritage asset, and that the relative value of all character defining features must be determined in order to formulate any intervention plans. Principles for the non-destructive testing were extended, and the need to record such things as carpenter's marks were added. The new sections on interventions in the 2017 principles combined the old 1999 sections on interventions with repairs and replacements. It is considerably extended to reflect advances in conservation philosophy and strategies, and new principles have been added. The fundamental principles for interventions, however, remain unchanged, that interventions should follow traditional practices, be reversible, and should not prejudice or impede future conservation work. The potential confusion in the original principles about contemporary materials and technologies was clarified in the new section on present-day materials and technologies. Reference to epoxy resins has been omitted. New principles were added to the sections on monitoring and maintenance for preventive maintenance to stress that monitoring should be carried out to ascertain the effectiveness of the conservation methods used and to ensure the long-term performance of the materials used. The section on historic forest reserves emphasizes that availability of suitable timbers is essential for the conservation of wooden heritage and the crucial role that forest reserves play in conservation work. It calls for institutions responsible for the conservation of monuments and sites to encourage the protection of original woodland reserves and establish stores of seasoned timber for conservation work. I hope that future revisions, future revisions or annex documents will recognize the significance of traditional forestry practices, forest ecologies, and woodland management. The section on education and training now takes account of the concept of intangible heritage, and several points are of particular importance. Traditional knowledge and skills used in constructing wooden heritage should be recorded, preserved, and recovered. Educational programs are an essential part of raising awareness of wooden heritage. Recognition and understanding of values and cultural significance should be encouraged, and education and training programs are the foundation of a sustainable conservation and development policy. This is an important point. For example, skilled and experienced conservation carpenters and millwrights are highly specialized craftsmen, and they are getting harder and harder to find. I'm sure you'll agree. Finally, a glossary of terms has been added in the new principles. The concept of evolving buildings and temporary structures were added, and in the new glossary, they are defined as evolving buildings retain an active social role in present-day society associated with a traditional way of life, and in which the evolutionary process is still in progress. Such structures exhibit significant material evidence of their evolution over time. Temporary structures are built, used, and disassembled periodically as part of a culture's ceremonies or other activities. They embody traditions, craftsmanship, and traditional knowledge. Examples of evolving buildings include our historic cathedrals and churches. and the Anana Salt Valley in Spain, in continuous use for the past 6,500 years. An example of temporary structures include the tablados of Mexico, temporary bull rings erected and dismantled every year for winter fiestas. Building materials are stored by villagers who then come together to re-erect the tablados for the annual cultural festivals. And temporary wooden huts in Barale, Ethiopia, a stop on the salt caravan coming from the Danakil Desert. So, how has ICOMOS been promoting the 2017 principles these past years? Since they were adopted in Delhi, the 2017 principles have been translated into 14 languages, including 5 of the world's top 10. Excuse me. You will note that we do not yet have a Ukrainian language version. We need one. We have also been expanding and broadening the IWC membership to make it more multidisciplinary. We're very keen to recruit archaeobotanists, waterlogged wood archaeologists, foresters, anthropologists, ecologists, millwrights, as well as more dendrochronologists, marine specialists, conservation carpenters, and joinery conservators. We are encouraging international cultural heritage conservation courses and other education and training bodies and institutions to also include the new ICOMOS Wood Principles in their syllabuses. Some already follow the 1993 ICOMOS Guidelines for Education and Training, you see here on the screen. And since 2017, the ICOMOS Wood International ICOMOS Wood Committee's international symposiums, too many words, I apologize, have focused on being broader, more holistic, multidisciplinary forums for the interchange of experience, ideas, and knowledge of the conservation of wooden-built heritage, all as embraced in the 2017 ICOMOS Principles. Past themes have included new horizons for the conservation of wooden-built heritage, beyond disciplines, learning from inherited knowledge. And this year in May, the IWC's 27th International Symposium is being held in Turkey. I hope you will all think about attending. Well, what about the future? There are still unresolved issues in the 2017 principles and matters that they don't deal with at all. We also want to translate the principles into Ukrainian and more languages, especially indigenous ones. Finally, I'd like to leave you with this last thought. How can we keep improving on what the 2017 principles have achieved so far? Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful and very rich. And we have questions and comments, but they will have to wait until the end of the presentation section. But thank you for a very rich, very informative presentation.
Pleasure.
Mihailo, and thank you, Doug, for being with us despite the cough. Mihailo, over to you.
Good evening to everyone. Let me show my slides. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So thank you very much for inviting me. It is an honor to be here today and to demonstrate what we're doing in Ukraine in terms of wooden architecture. I am a museum director. I am the director of Lviv Skansen, which is around 50 years old, and this is an open sky museum. I'm going to tell you about things we are engaged in during this these 4 years since 2021, this is the period which had plentiful challenges and both COVID and full-scale invasion. So you can already see our first hut, which was moved here to our museum from elsewhere. Actually, this museum, Open Sky Museum, has more than 120 objects, and it is a huge territory. And as soon as the war started, we've got a lot of challenges. First of all, we're threatened by missile attacks, and this is one part of the challenge. Another part of the challenge is that we lack our employees. We don't have enough employees, and unfortunately, we need to compensate that. And so we need to keep as many employees as possible. We need to share our experience and knowledge, because we believe that the indirect challenges are the most serious ones, because the timber architecture, especially heritage, needs daily maintenance. This is our church, the church of from the village of Krevka. It was moved to our museum in 2021. I think you can recognize it because it's very recognizable among all our objects, and we start our tour with this object. Our museum is not just an open sky museum. We are a big public space. We're a big educational space, and this is our new infrastructural object. We try to provide an opportunity to share information and to engage various audiences. So we invite everyone, children aged like from birth, and we welcome all sorts of visitors aged 0 to 100, let's say, and just come to us, take a walk. This is how our new reception looks like. This is a museum which needs to maintain many crafts. 4 times a year, we arrange big festivals, Easter, Christmas, and solstice fairs of vernacular crafts. We are selecting the best representatives of vernacular crafts from all over Ukraine. We're inviting such masters to show us to keep the tradition alive. And this is one of the goals of the museum, to keep the tradition alive, to network, to promote such crafts, and to promote our culture and heritage. Well, this is another example. 4 kilometers to the border with Belarus, and this was the last transportation of a house before the full-scale invasion. This is a typical village house, which, as you can see, is rather poorly, so it is dilapidating, and yet our museum didn't have any samples from Polissa forest region, and so the process of transporting this building was rather quick, because it usually takes a year to move the object, to overcome the red tape, as you have mentioned already. It is vast. It requires vast efforts. And on your left, you can see this is the calendar showing the last day when this building was inhabited. And after that, we started the removal process. So without the restoration and our intervention, this house would just collapse. And we tried to use our employees to move the house. and we tried to go by the book as much as it is possible in our situation. And so you see here we are disassembling the roof, and then we are loading things on the truck. And this is how this object looks like now. So it took us from the end of 2021 till the middle of 2024 to finalize this project. And we were conserving the timber, we were imbibing all sorts of, impregnating the wood with all sorts of chemicals to preserve it. And this is the last object that we dealt with in 2022 before the invasion. And this building is now stored in the museum. It is going to represent the Hutsul region. On the 6th of February, just 2 weeks before the invasion, we got one very valuable object burned, and unfortunately we couldn't restore it, and so we started to work with other objects as soon as we could to illustrate, to showcase other typologies. And now it is being stored. As soon as the situation is is better, we are going to start assembling it. So this is the object from last year for the museum. It is a very interesting case, a very interesting exhibit, which is going to take the place of the object that was burned, and it is going to present a specific vernacular typology. This building is already transported to the museum, and it was one of the first objects which the museum digitalized. As you see, our colleague from the Polytechnical University is doing that, and we are doing the photogrammetry, the 3D model. And I guess that this year we're going to assemble it, and definitely all the digital data will bring our documentation to the next level. Here you can see it being disassembled, and on your left, this is not just a stick. No, this is part of a joint which keeps the beams together. And so this was the first, let's say, wedge we took out of this building. And if there are specialists who tried disassembling wooden timber houses, you can imagine how difficult it was to get it out of 150-year-old timber construction. We used hydraulic crane to work on it very slowly because it expanded so much. It was very difficult to remove. And this building, as I said, this hut is already there in the museum. It is stored, it is restored, and this year we are planning to assemble it again. And this is our next object, and this is the object that is already functioning in the museum, because, you know, war is war, but restoration is restoration. And so, as I said at the beginning, we have more than 120 objects, actually 125, and they need maintenance. And we also need to support the teams of craftsmen who maintain these professional skills and who continue to actually restore our roofs. This is a roof out of rashes. I think this is like 200-year-old technology, even earlier. And we are commissioning services of such specialists during the 3 years. I think we have restored 15 objects. And it is definitely very difficult to get funding for sponsoring such craftsmen, but we are very grateful to the foundations such as Lviv and other ones, those who understand the importance of vernacular timber architecture, and they help us a lot. Here you can see this is a finished object. It looks excellent. And here we had a big structure. Unfortunately, it was very damaged by all sorts of worms, you know, insects of all kinds. And actually what we had was like 2.5 walls, but the conservators conserved everything they could, and they poured it, bathed it in all sorts of chemicals so that we could save as much as we could. And here you can see it was assembled, and this is the way it looks now. Again, we got the help from our colleagues to roof it. Another thing is that our museum has a lot of sacred architectural objects, 7 churches. Here we had to change the roof, and that was it. And other projects include the removal of those very small shingles which make the roof. But this is the way it looks now after we re-roofed it. And it also got all sorts of comprehensive lift, let's say, facial lift. And here we are again working on the roof, because this winter was rather warm, and well, this is the way it looks now. We managed to do it. So this is what we are doing in brief. I can tell you a lot about challenges, but for us the biggest challenge is people, and you know, the lack of our specialists, because everything else can be bought, but knowledge, experience are priceless, and they are our critical resource. That is all I have to say.
And it is very important indeed. And well, bravo to all our speakers. And can I just say that we have actually finished the session, the presentation session, on time, which is testimony to the degree of your professionalism that is really rare. Wonderful. We have wonderful 3 presentations. I have a lot of questions, but my questions I will keep to the end. We have tons of questions in the chat, and I'm going to ask them one by one in the order in which they appeared in our chat. The first question has appeared from our colleague Jurko from Skeiron, and this question is to Marcel. And Jurko, if you would like to add something, I encourage you to unmute yourself. But the question is, Marcel, which projects do you consider a success, or maybe we can say, what is the most successful project in your eyes? And then there is also what project, I would maybe say, what aspects of the project you consider a failure?
Well, I'm not going to say, I think, publicly here on record which project is the best one out of all the ones we've received so far, or let alone which one is a failure. I don't think any of them are failures. Obviously, we have very different kinds of projects, very different kinds of building types, you know, the thing that makes the documentation, and bear in mind that we only fund documentation, we don't fund conservation or restoration, etc. I mean, the projects that are really good are the ones that produce the quality outputs, right? The quality drawings, the photographs that kind of really give a good idea of the building, and that are like taken systematically rather than just touristic snapshots kind of photographs, so to speak. But what makes projects really successful from our perspective is if they really managed to engage with the communities that own the knowledge, if you like, embodied in the building. So we're not too keen on projects that simply go out there, take photographs, make beautiful drawings, scan the building, make a sketch fab 3D model of it, and then kind of walk out again and kind of leave the local community just like, oh, we had this visit and that's it. So we've had some projects that really engage with the local communities, that came up with outreach programs where they involved children, for instance, in the community and taught them about the value of the buildings, of the crafts that they embody, of the skills that are necessary, etc. We had those that kind of trained people, or that tried to train people in documentation methods, right? So, you know, how to use scanners, how to draw, how to look after the buildings, etc. And I think the ones that do that kind of build capacity for the future, that raise interest in the community, in the value of their traditions. To me, those ones are the probably the most valuable ones, really. And but to be fair, most of the projects do that to some extent.
This is a wonderful answer, and thank you so much. And of course, the impact of your project is immeasurable through that. I'm going to add that I see Eileen Orbasli, who is from your team, who I spy her here. So compliments to both of you. And maybe if there is a time, we can also include Eileen in the discussion. There is another question from Vladimir, also to Marcel. Compliments for the project, which is commendable. There is a very practical question, which is how do you manage the security risk? So, for example, if there is a scan of a church or of any building, and the photos, the scan show the valuable objects, but the building, which is endangered, doesn't really have proper security. What are your mechanisms for managing these security questions? And Vladimir, if I misrepresented anything, I encourage you to speak up. I was trying to summarize your question.
That is a very good question, actually, and one that we did, I suppose, think about, if not necessarily was always at the forefront of our minds. I suppose the answer is that we, this is why we have our ethics procedure in place. This is why we want to make sure that whoever goes out there and documents those buildings works with the community, talks to the community, gets permission from the community to use that information, to take those photographs, to scan that building, and really explains very clearly to the owners of the buildings, or the people that use them and build them, what is happening with that information, and gets their permission to make it openly accessible on the internet, I suppose. And really, to a large extent, that's probably all that we can do. We kind of leave that responsibility, that decision to say the world can see what we have in our building, to the people that own them. We've had projects where owners say you're not allowed into the bedroom, or you're not allowed into the kitchen. We don't want you to document the inside, and then we respect that. Then we only document the buildings from the outside. So we really only make available, if you like, whatever the owners of that building or the community that uses them allows, really. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's a good question, really, because we are aware that obviously people's interiors are just downloadable, really, to a certain extent. But if somebody is happy with it and understand that that's the case, then that's a risk that they take, I suppose, rather than that we do.
Thank you. I think this is wonderful answer to an important question. And let's move on. If there is a need to follow up, then we encourage Vladimir to ask a follow up. There is a question. There's a fundamental question which was asked to Marcel and to Doug. But I think if Mihailo wants to contribute, I think that this is it's a question. Oh, sorry, I missed one. So there is first a question only to Marcel, which is, will you have a call this year for the program?
Right. Well, we're waiting for official confirmation from Arcadia to hear whether the program will be renewed or not, really. So I sadly can't say that at this stage here.
Thank you. We will keep our fingers crossed. I had to ask because I think that this is a measure of the success of your program, that you have some people here in a chat who will be very interested in applying. So then there is a question I already started mentioning, which was asked for Marcel and for Doug, but I think it's also relevant for Mihailo, which is, what do you consider wood architecture? Do you mean structures that are purely made of wood, or a mixed structure, so with a wood component?
Can I jump in and start that answer, Maya?
Of course.
Thanks, Chris. I think this is sort of a really important question. It's fundamental. It's why we in the ICOMOS Wood Committee thought it was important to update and rewrite the principles from 1999, which were concerned predominantly, as the title says, with timber structures. Since the 90s, we've learned that that definition is very much out of date. Wooden architecture, timber structures, and that's the reason why we expanded and broadened the scope of the principles to include what we've called wooden built heritage, and that includes everything from the sort of laced wooden construction of the 16th century churches in Ethiopia, wooden ships, waterlogged Irish trackways, 7th and 8th century juniper sanctuary screens in churches in Ethiopia. So to answer your question, Chris, it very much, as you say, it's any component made of wood, either separately or together with other materials, you can, if I urge you to sort of read through the principles to understand that. I urge you to read the NARA document on authenticity from 1994, and hopefully and anything else you can get your hand on, because the field of wooden built heritage is wide open right now, and that's what we were trying to get to with our revised principles in 2017.
Wonderful. Thank you. Marcel, Mihailo, would you like to add?
I think we have a slightly more restrictive perspective in the program, where we do say buildings need to have a wooden kind of structural element to it, because I suppose from our perspective, most buildings will integrate wood in one way or the other. It could be, it could be a wooden door frame or a wooden window frame. So for the purposes of the program, we had to restrict ourselves to buildings that have structural wooden elements in them, or for instance, if they don't have them in the build, but they have a very structural wooden roof, for instance, then we would allow that. But we wanted to avoid people applying for funding for earthen buildings which have wooden doors, for instance. So we had to kind of somehow restrict ourselves a little bit.
Wonderful, thank you. Mihailo, do you want to add something from your perspective?
Absolutely, thank you very much. As a director of a timber architecture museum, I agree with Marcel that timber architecture is something, a structure which is built of timber. But if only the roof is made of timber, or maybe the roof is made of some other material, because there are all sorts of roofs in the world, it is important for the structure to have timber bearing elements to be considered timber architecture.
Wonderful. I think it actually goes back to the differences between the two ICOMOS documents. So and I think it's also, so to say, horses for courses, and wonderful that ICOMOS is so inclusive, whilst others are so precise. So when we spoke, thank you all three of you, and we have. Doug, I hope that this is good news. We had a comment from Vasil Petrek in the chat, and Vasil mentioned that the ICOMOS documents have been translated into Ukrainian. Vasil, if you are still here, could you unmute yourself and maybe say a few words? I don't know if...
Good evening, dear colleagues. Good day, depending upon where you are. Thank you very much, Maya, for giving me the floor. Great to see you today. We actually talked to you earlier today, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to participate in the seminar. Actually, I can see here a few representatives of ICOMOS Ukraine. I can see Astafieva, Seluk, and in 2022, with the start of the full-scale invasion, the initiative by Mr. Miron Astafiev enabled us to have the Ukrainian translation of ICOMOS Principles, which we used to formulate the principles of conservation of timber churches, and we started full-scale efforts to save timber churches. So thank you very much for reminding us, Mr. Evans, that this Ukrainian translation is not yet considered to be official by the official ICOMOS organization. So I'm going to investigate this matter. I think we need to come together in a work meeting under the ICOMOS Ukraine aegis, and I know that quite soon we were planning a meeting so that we could send this translation officially to Mr. Evans. We have your contacts. We're going to contact you, and you will get our Ukrainian translation very soon. Thank you very much for this webinar. Thank you for raising this question. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And this is webinar in action.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Vasil.
Thank you, Dax. Thank you, Vasil. And we have. I'm going through the list. We have two questions from Marvin. The first question is to Mihailo, but I think everyone can pitch in. I think, in fact, it's not specified, it's for Mihailo. So, I imagine that this was inspired by what Mihailo said. So, would moving or transporting wooden heritage structures or object qualify as heritage, since it has been moved from its original location? So, how do we, Mihailo, maybe you could pick it up first. How does moving wooden heritage structure affect them? I mean, this is crucial for your museum. I don't imagine there are many people in the world that are better placed to answer.
Thank you very much for the question. Undoubtedly, there are native environments, non-native environments, and the monuments of architecture are museified. So 98% of our objects in the museum have been transported. During the field trips of recent years, around 50 field trips we undertook, very often we are saving buildings which will die in their native environments. They will be burned, they will collapse, they will dilapidate, they will be ruined by the people. So we have a great opportunity now in Ukraine, because Ukraine is very poor financially, and especially in the mountainous regions and in some distant areas. Actually, our poverty prevented interventions into such timber structures, and this allowed us to transport them and save them, actually. And this is not the situation in our neighboring countries, in Poland, for instance, because in Poland, a lot of buildings, due to a better economical situation, was lost, really, which is a paradox. But when we are moving a building, we are moving it as a whole. When a building is like 110 years old, maybe it was re-roofed like for 7 times during its life cycle, but we are trying to conserve all the elements. And if the roof is made of, let's say, shingles, or it's made of rushes, and if the roof cannot be preserved just because of the state of the material, we can digitalize it, and then we can re-roof it using the same materials, because using the same craft, and then we will conserve it.
Thank you so much, Mihailo, and I think that this is a wonderful quality of the wooden heritage, this thesaurus boat quality. Every element is exchanged, but it's the same building. Doug, would you like to add something to what Mihailo wonderfully said?
Again, another excellent question. I would have said that in terms of moving the difficulty of perception about moving heritage might have been the case many years ago under sort of old, out-of-date definitions of authenticity. You know, there was a day when it was deemed that for something to be authentic, it must be in its original location. We've moved on from that. I think the heritage field agrees that that's an old, out-of-date, almost might say anachronistic definition, and that, you know, provided the moving is appropriate and relevant to the heritage asset itself, then the moving is just another part of the story, and therefore, you know, can be deemed to be part of the authenticity or significance of the historic asset. So, as I say, we've come a long way, Marvin, but I think moving, you know, we just have to look at the museums around the world to know that it's an important aspect of sort of protecting and conserving and promoting the conservation of our heritage. So I would agree that it's just a significant part of authenticity as all the other aspects.
Thank you so much, Doug. Marcel, would you like to jump into that as an anthropologist?
Just I would say that heritage is a living tradition, right? It's a living thing, and you know, all objects, whether they're buildings or books or whether they're intangible or not, you know, I mean, everything lives and has a life kind of to go through, and movement is a part of that, really. So I think to say that it has to stay in a particular place kind of kills it off. So I personally, yeah, very much think that things can move and be heritage.
Thank you very much. This is a wonderful answer. And to a very important question, I have to apologize because I missed someone's raised hand, and thank you for Vera to alerting me to this. I'm sorry, I apologize to Miron Stakiv, who had his hands raised and I didn't notice. Miron, if you would like to ask your question, please do so. I don't know if you're still with us. Maybe.
Thank you very much. Really, this is an excellent program, and thank you for inviting lecturers and guests from Great Britain, and thank you for inviting such a brilliant audience. So I think we're witnessing very interesting and important work being done in Ukraine, both technologically and theoretically. Ukraine is aligning with the international conservation practices and movement in timber architecture. We have been working for a long time with timber architecture, and thank you so very much for organizing this event. It is very important. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you for your kind words. We very much appreciate it. Appreciate them. So I'm going to move on to the next question. It's but really thank you. We appreciate the very lively audience and so many questions and so many kind and important contributions. So another question is from Marvin, and I think that this is a question really to all speakers, and it is a very pertinent question now in Ukraine. So when heritage structures and objects were destroyed due to war, would there be any mechanism for monetary compensation to the affected by the entity or party who caused the destruction? This is a very relevant question to Ukraine, but I think it's a relevant question to, unfortunately, many contexts in the world. So, Doug, since you are ICOMOS representative, would you like to take this first?
I'd like to defer to Mikhailo, because I mean he's really on the front line of this. For me to say anything might, yeah, I don't yeah, I think it would, that's for Mikhailo to say something.
Let me just ask you, I'm sorry to insist, but it just the 1954 convention speaks about the duties of protection, but are there any international discussions about the compensations? Or because in as much as I know, there is nothing written in international law, but then my knowledge is limited. Do you know of any discussions perhaps based around the 1954 convention about not only responsibility for destruction, but also the duty to compensate?
Wow. Yeah, that's a minefield, and that's a minefield. I mean, there's no discussion in the Wood Committee of ICOMOS. I'm not partial to what the board talks about, or the scientific council. It's similar to UNESCO. It's a sort of a hierarchical organization, unfortunately. But if you'll allow me, I can send the question up and see if there's, I have my contacts.
Excellent. That is a wonderful answer.
I have somebody I can talk to. One of them is Zeynep, who's the vice president, and she's been active on the ground in UK, in Ukraine. And if anybody knows, she will. So
that's a wonderful point, and she is
yeah.
a wonderful lady. And in fact, I revisited Ukraine with her at the beginning of the war. So she has Ukrainian cause close to her heart, and wonderful idea to ask her. And maybe we can send some information to the audience together with the recording of this webinar.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Mikhailo, would you like to take this question?
I would like to be a bit destructive here because, in Ukraine, we are now at war with the barbarians. And the war has shown that most of the international protocols, charters, documents, and we are trying to adhere to them. And we were hopeful that they will be efficient, or they will be effective. They are not effective. We can demand compensation. We can appeal for compensation if the party to a conflict is playing by the rules. Because there are rules even in war, while Russia is not warring by the rules. So as far as I know, we need to document all the damages. And I'm not sure whether anyone from the big international organizations, whether anyone will help us get the compensation. I'm not positive about that. We have enormous damages presently. We're facing it, and talking about compensating cultural damages is very difficult because we are at war with the barbarians, and the international protocols do not work the way we thought they would. because we thought that one protocol, a charter, etc., like the conventions, the UN conventions, we hoped that they would work. We had so many meetings with all sorts of international organizations, but we are powerless very often. Thank you.
Thank you. Not a very optimistic answer, but I think that this is let's see it as a call for help and for solidarity to do something together. Marcel, would you like to add something to this?
Well, to be honest, there's not much I'm really not an expert in this at all, really. I think it would be great if there was that, compensation, but I really don't know, really. I very much hear what Mihailo is saying, and
But I think that this also goes to show the importance of documentation and the necessity of documentation in crisis and war contexts. Thank you so much. Yes.
Maya and Mihailo, listening to the translation, I'm very moved by what Mihailo has said, and also on behalf of ICOMOS, very upset. And I would really like, you said there's going to be a recording of this. Is there any way I could get a transcript? And Mihailo, I don't know if you would give your permission, but I would love a transcript of what you just said that I could send to sort of my colleagues in ICOMOS up the chain, because things like the sort of things that Mihailo just said, I'm not sure are being said enough in enough places to the right kind of people. So if you'd permit me, I would love to, take up your case and send it up the chain.
Well, to me, it sounds wonderful, Mihailo. If you agree, in any case, we will share the recording in Ukrainian and in English. So there will be a version with where Vera will correct me, but there is a version that will have the translation on it. So you'll be able to it's shareable in English. But Mihailo, is that okay for you? Thank you so much.
Myron will know where I'm coming from, because I've been trying to stay involved since February or March 22, when I first came in contact with Myron through a colleague in the Wood Committee, and we tried to do lots. We tried to do involved colleagues, and unfortunately, it just seemed to sort of fizzle out. So again, I'm very moved by what Mihailo just said, and I think it's time to kind of start beating the drum again.
This is really wonderful, and thank you so much, Doug. I think that this is a wonderful initiative. Mihailo, I see that you have unmuted yourself. Do you want to say something?
This war has shown that a lot of things we believed in as an institution, as professionals, as people who care about our heritage, we believed in them, but they are absolutely absent, because for 70 years, for many years, we have been living in the illusion of safety. And suddenly the whole structure collapsed. Thousands of people are trying to build some kind of new framework of safety, of security, starting with ICOMOS. In various organizations, they are trying to help us. But very often, just to return back to one of the presentations, we are, banning on the closed door of bureaucracy. So and we are wasting time and we are wasting efforts, but it's, you know, it's natural. If you take it in terms of the historical context, this is the process that we need, this is the way we need to take. So every Skype meeting, every Zoom meeting, with every meeting, we are trying to be more productive. And yes, it is good to discuss war when we are staying at home, somewhere in university, having like 6 working hours per day, with a weekend, etc. And we're discussing big threats. But it's quite another thing when you go to the eastern Ukraine, when at night you hear the missile attack and you cannot think about having a holiday, having like spring vacations or things. During these 3 years of war, you know, there is one urgent thing, like to save the collection from Zaporizhia, to evacuate it, and you understand that you need to host the colleagues, to meet the buses, the train carriages who are coming to you at 5 in the morning, and your partners say, well, you know, my working hours are over, and my partner said, well, we are going to contact our management on Monday. And the whole scheme collapses. And so our efforts are useless. And during these 3 years, we got quite a lot of assistance and we continue getting a lot of help. And on the part of my institution, we are very grateful for getting such support. And that is why we are here and we can talk about it here. And thank you very much for these plans. But let us not have illusions. We have new challenges, new reality, and we need to adapt and we need to build a new framework to work within. Thank you.
Mihailo, thank you so very much. I'm sorry, someone is, I've heard someone who maybe wanted to make a contribution. I'm not talking over anyone. I find it very difficult to follow up from the important things that Mihailo said. I think that we have exceeded our times by 5 minutes, and the speakers have been very generous with your time. But I think that the importance of what Mihailo has very honestly but also very diplomatically said, and this call for a change, this is really the most meaningful way that we could have had for wrapping up. So I propose that at this point, I'm going to thank our wonderful speakers for absolutely phenomenal presentations. I'm going to thank all of you, the wonderful audience, for phenomenal questions. The questions that we didn't manage to answer, we're going to answer in a written form, in an email that we will send together with the recording of this webinar. This has been wonderful and in many ways humbling, because it is always humbling to be exposed to what the colleagues in Ukraine have to face and to the wonderful work that they are doing despite the very difficult situation. So thank you all of you. You are an inspiration in these dark times. And thank you once again to the speakers, and of course to our wonderful translator, Oliena, and also to the unsung heroes of the webinar, Vera and Athena, who have made the technological side possible, who made sure that everything went smoothly. Thank you all for your wonderful work, and we are looking forward to continuing our discussions offline and online, and to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you.